Okay. Special City Council meeting agenda. Notice is hereby given that the above call meeting of the governing body of the city of Balcones Heights, Texas will be held on Wednesday, September 18, 2024 at 6 p.m. in the Justice Center located at 3300 Hillcrest Drive, Balcones Heights, Texas 78201, to consider and act upon any lawful subject which may become for said meeting, including among others, the following items to be discussed and acted upon. Call to order and recording of a quorum. We have a quorum. And we have the invocation and pledges of allegiance to the U.S. and Texas flag. I thank the Honorable Sellers, Councilman Sellers will have the honor to do the invocation this time.
Heavenly Father, we gathered here today to form judgments, make decisions that will affect the lives of those committed to our charge. Please give us the wisdom and understanding to guide our decisions, may they be fair, just, and work. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Let me repeat, we're in the public comment period. At this time, citizens who have filed out a registration form prior to the start of the meeting may speak on any topic they wish to bring to the attention of the governing body, so long as the topic is not on the agenda for this meeting. During the citizens to be heard section, no council action may take place and no council discussion or response is required to the speaker. Citizens who wish to speak on a specific agenda item when that item is called for discussion must fill out a registration form prior to the start of the meeting indicating which agenda item they wish to address. So we have one only, Ms. Sanchez?
Right, that's the only one I
Okay.
received.
So we have Mr. Charles, former Councilman Charles White Jr., 211 Leisure Drive.
Is that better? Think so? Right. Just so y'all know, y'all may be aware of it, I'm not sure, but the State Attorney General Paxton is suing the County Commissioners Court. It appears that the court was going to send out, had ordered that voter forms be mailed to unregistered people. And, you know, the way I know it, if you wanted to vote absentee, you had to call and request a voter application or a voter form, which is funny because the last presidential election, we got 6 forms. I should have kept them, but I didn't. Anyway, so the county commissioners decided to get a third party, to hire a third party with taxpayer money to distribute voter registration forms to unregistered individuals in the county. So we have to wait and see what's going on with that. I'm gonna go back in history. Y'all won't know this, but my dad was on city council at one time. After the mayor had left, they were in a big budget crunch. They just didn't have the money. Roy Miller had left sometime before. So I knew dad was concerned. He went to a budget meeting. He came home And he was just ecstatic, happy, dancing around, believe it or not, at his age. And he says, "We have money, we have money." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Roy Miller showed us where the missing funds were." And I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" He told Dad, and this is quote, he hid the money from Johnny so he wouldn't spend it. That's a direct quote. But that's an assumption of committing guilt. So I looked at Dad and I said, "Was Roy going to jail? You just can't take the people's money and put it somewhere." And he said, "No." He said, "We're just so happy to get funds to balance the budget. We're okay." So anyway, I was on council. Probably about, I don't know, 10 years or so went by. And I used to walk the streets a whole lot before my demise with my back and neck. And I'd go by and talk to Johnny. So after about 3 years, I said, "Well, Johnny," I said, "I need to tell you something." And I told him the story that I've told y'all, you know, and he goes, "Wait a minute, I'm going to show you something." So he brought out a letter from the state and it exonerated him. He had himself investigated. He was exonerated of any malfeasance or any wrongdoing. So I encourage you to go by. If I were you, I wouldn't print it and give it out. Go by and talk to him and read that letter. Because when we were at the county elections, the mayor hollered out, "Johnny's a crook," which sort of took me back. And then there was a comment here about spending money. So I thought y'all should know that. Another thing y'all might be concerned about, I'd have to find the letter, but years ago, during the Dominguez process, an officer pulled off a letter that was on the bulletin board, and it was addressed to reserves. And it said, if you stay here as a reserve, you will no longer receive a commission." The officer that wrote it is still here. I'm not going to say his name. I never divulge people's names. But if you wonder why you're not getting reserves, we had 24 reserves at one time. The streets were crowded. I mean, Balcony High cars going everywhere. Of course, we don't have that type of coverage anymore. So anyway, I thought y'all might find that interesting. If you have questions, call me, come by. Please check with Johnny. Oh, Delia's here. Delia could probably verify some of those facts with Roy.
No, I cannot.
Well, okay. Well, y'all,
It's best not to comment.
well, not this time, but thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. White, for your comments. So that was the only citizens to be heard portion. We'll now move on to the business items. The first business item, the only business item that we have for this agenda is discussion and possible action to appoint Albert Lara as interim city administrator effective immediately with an annual salary of $115,000 plus applicable benefits until a permanent city administrator is hired with a 2-week overlap period to transition the new city administrator. So we have this placed on the agenda, and let me call for a vote on this. So let's call for a vote from the council. Do we have a motion for this item on the agenda?
I would motion to approve the motion, the agenda item.
Okay, so do we have a second to that motion? No, what happens is we have to make sure that we get a second to it and then we start discussing it. So the
Okay.
discussion. takes
I'm gonna
place after a
second that then.
Okay, so we have a Council Sellers as a second. Is that correct, Mr. Sellers? Okay, now we'll open it up for discussion. Councilman Burton?
Yes, I have, some concerns here. First of which, meeting of August the 26th, held here, a regular city council meeting. Item on the agenda was placed by Councilmember Sines. It says, discussion and possible action that all meeting agenda items proposed by mayor or city council that may have possible action includes supporting documentation. I have not received any type of documentation, any resume, any application, any information on who's going to take Mr. Lara's spot. And I don't think it's appropriate this time that we make a decision because it's supposed to have documentation. And a resume or application or whatever you want to refer to it as would then give us item number 16, which was placed by the same council member, code book of ordinance section 3127, that city administrator must meet minimum qualifications as detailed in the city administrator's job description. And again, I have not received that, and I don't think anybody else has. So I don't think it's appropriate at this time to vote on this. I have not any documentation or anything.
So do you have a motion to offer, Mr. Burton, Councilman Burton?
Motion to table.
Yeah, you'll have to resolve the motion. There's already a motion and a second on the table. So you got to resolve that before and a different motion can be made.
Okay, so he has an amendment that he'd like to make to the motion. So if you take the vote on the first and then there's a majority, then the second amendment needs to come in somewhere before that.
So the motion right now is to approve this contract and that was seconded. So you'll have to vote on that first. If you're asking, since he didn't make the motion, he can't amend it without the permission of the person that made the motion. So
Okay.
he can.
So am I correct in the assessment that the correct process was taken in the sense that in order for us to be moving on this, it has to have a first and then a second and open for discussion and then a vote. But if a council member in the past we've had where the attorney has consulted with us and told us that an amendment can be made if a council member wants to amend or change that motion
Yeah, you
at the
need the,
time that we're doing the vote.
Mr. Burton, then we need the permission of the person that, and the person that made the motion and the one that seconded it.
I'm sorry, repeat that again?
He would need then the permission of the person that made the motion and the one that seconded it to amend their motion because he's not the one that made it. You can always amend your own motion, but you're asking, he's essentially asking,
Well, he wants to
The
make an
person who made it.
alternate motion to it,
and
a counter motion.
and that can't be done until the motion that's currently up for discussion is resolved.
Okay.
You got to do them one at a time.
Even if it breaks council policy, they're actually, this was voted on last month.
Yeah.
This was voted on. They're breaking council policy without giving us any supporting documentation.
Right. And that's the whole issue and the whole, what I see as the mayor here trying to mediate. What I see here is that they're violating their own,
Policy.
Mr. Sines' own policy that he proposed in a council meeting and we adopted. So you can't change that in the middle of the game. So now he wants to make a motion on an item on agenda that cannot be voted on because it does not meet the minimum requirement of his threshold in the ordinance in which he modified that said you need to have supporting documentation for any action item on the agenda. So therefore, what we really need to do is that we can't take action on this item because there's no supporting documentation. And neither of the council members on the council, no one had any information to make a informed decision today. So without that information, you can't make an informed decision. There's no backup. There's no explanation as to why Mr. Lotta is being selected.
So
How did they come up to the amount of $115,000? And that raises the question, was their deliberation prior to putting this on the item on the agenda in violation of the Open Meetings Act? Because to my knowledge, 3 individuals, Mr. Sines, Councilman Sines, Councilman Lysia, and Councilman Sellers, placed that item on the agenda by petitioning the city secretary on the 10th of September. We didn't get notice of it until the 11th of September. There was a stipulation on that we could not place an item on the agenda. No one was allowed to place anything on the agenda because we did not meet the 6-day requirement. So it was very strategically done on the 10th to not allow anyone on the council to place any kind of information on the agenda. And it was almost, you blocked everyone out, these 3 members, when they did that, because it didn't meet the deadline of the 6 days. It passed the deadline of the 6 days. So it was a very strategic move that was done to do that. But the most important is the fact that none of the other council members have any backup information in which Councilman Sines very emphatically in his last meeting when he proposed this, made and stressed very much that we needed to have supporting documentation to make informed decisions. This is a very important decision that's being made here. And getting back to the possibility of an open meetings violation is that the 3 individuals that proposed this item, Counselor, had to have spoken to each other. Otherwise, how else did they come to the conclusion of a stated amount of $116,000, $115,000? How did they come to that number conclusively? All of 3 of them in a council meeting prior to coming to a council meeting, excuse me. That deliberation had to be taking place in violation of the Open Meetings Act. So that's the other concern that I have. But mainly the main thing is no supporting documentation, Mr. Sines. So therefore, this item should not be considered, should not be voted on, but I wanted to make sure we went through the process of getting it, opening it up for discussion. So we are at that discussion period right now. And I have to rule and say that this item cannot be voted on right now because there is no supporting documentation that is provided to the city council.
I would,
I may have been the only
Mayor,
one.
if I may.
I may have been the only.
So that-
only one.
that started as a question for me. and
Yeah,
it-
and I'm just
okay.
giving you some background, so.
I'll be
please-
glad to give
please
a
go ahead and-
response.
Yeah, please respond if you like.
So on this rule that was adopted this August, I have
Yes.
the agenda item
Mhm.
here. What was the outcome of that? Y'all voted to amend the bylaws or what was the?
It was voted to enact an ordinance, an action item by
Okay.
Councilman Sines and Councilman Lysia to take action to make sure specifically the mayor
To have
and the
supporting
city council
documentation.
provide supporting documentation on any action item.
And, but was that like, I mean, y'all have your bylaws are like your city council procedures. And then you have your ordinances. What was, I guess this would be a question for you.
Councilman, you,
Should
Bert,
be in
you
the
still have the
minutes.
floor, so just state the whatever
Yeah, you may have
research
to,
you
good
get
there.
on that particular.
Well,
item
the
of,
question
where
is,
it pertains to.
was and she'll get the minutes, I guess, so we can see, but if y'all adopted a rule saying council can't take action on an item that doesn't have supporting documentation, and there isn't any here, then
We can't.
Then
take
it's
action.
not
I can,
possible.
I can read it again for you.
I have the agenda item. What I don't have is what y'all actually did with it. That'd be the minutes.
I won't get that till next council meeting because the minutes haven't been,
Well, she's gonna go get them.
And the intent, basically, it's embedded in my memory because it was geared towards me. And it just had the council in there in general, but it basically is to say, you cannot bring anything to the item on the agenda for council consideration that has any action. We can't take any action on it. if there is no supporting documentation. So in this case, there is no supporting documentation, can't take action. You can't bend the rules
And-
just for wherever you want, you know, it's not fair. It's not fair, Councilman.
In,
say it,
in
Councilman.
due respect, I may have been the only one that didn't get. Mr. Valverde, did you get any supporting documentation?
No, sir, negative.
Mr.
Mr.
Lefebvre,
Stellers?
did you get any supporting documentation?
I had seen some documentation. I'm very familiar with the individual and what we're moving forward with.
Yeah, but, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Mr. Sellers, did you get any documentation?
I got no paperwork. The only documentation is experience that he's had here for the city of Buckley Heights.
And the item agenda that was, I believe it was passed, is discussion and possible action to require all meeting agendas items proposed by mayor or city council that may have possible action include supporting documentation. So I have no supporting documentation. I can't make a decision. Other employees that have placed interest in the city secretary position have already sent out resumes. In fact, I just picked one up out of my mailbox just now. And you know, at least a resume or application at minimum. I think that's reasonable.
And
I yield the floor.
Mr. Lucia, go ahead.
And I guess what we will have to wait for the vote, because if I recall, the last comments was, we'll see how we abide by that. We'll see how we proceed with that. That's what I recall. So I'll wait for the final vote, see what it says. But I clearly remember the comment being said, well, we'll see what we do about that. We'll see if we can abide by that.
That was the vote?
No, that's what I'm saying, but I clearly remember those comments. I will see if we can abide by that. So we'll wait for the vote.
See, but that's, if I may respectfully, that's not relevant because you can say whatever you want to say. It's the vote that you took.
And
is what's
that's
important, the
exactly
vote
what
you
I
took.
said. I'm asking,
Yeah, but the
I'm
vote.
saying what was said, and I said I would wait for the vote
and
to
it
see
was
what the
passed.
outcomes.
That's all I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make, it was passed. You passed a rule and an ordinance that said you cannot take any action on any item on the agenda if you do not have the supporting documentation. So, you know, think about it. Look at the disservice you're doing to your community. It's a big disservice because one, you are, in my opinion, backroom dealing again. You have already set up somebody to take the position of interim, and we all know why it is. It's to prevent me from being in control because under the rule and the mayoral responsibilities under the city council relations on item B, number 9, specifically gives me the authority to act as a city administrator in the absence of the city administrator leaving. So you want to fill that position up because you want to prevent me from being in that position to have that authority. And that's fine. You want to do that and you want to do that disservice to the community, make a decision. But the problem that you're doing here is by doing your backroom dealings like this is that, first of all, you're not giving the opportunity to the city council to fully review a candidate that you have chosen, that only a select group of people, like Mr. Sellers and yourself and Mr. Sines, where you have selected this individual, but you haven't given that that courtesy to your other fellow council members on the council, to give them the opportunity to review, investigate, determine the qualifications of Mr. Lara, who has, in my opinion, I don't know much about him. I only met him a few times and we've only talked a few times. And to my understanding, he was resigning. He was resigning back in May until he decided to stay on till August. Now, all of a sudden, you're picking him as your new city administrator in a rushed manner. I called in a special call meeting specifically for this, okay? You assign a salary already to him without giving the ability for your fellow council members and your community to have input to determine if this is the course of action that this community and the citizens want to take. And you're short circuiting the system. You deliberately are doing that. It's so obvious
And,
what you're
and,
doing,
and if I may,
you know?
if I may interject, you have referenced back dealings and things of that nature. The
Mhm.
way the law is written, it requires 3 council members to submit an item for a special meeting. That's the discussion we had. Other than that, that's all that was done. By law, we are allowed to communicate and put an item on the agenda because by law, it requires 3 members. So there's nothing illegal and there's no backdoor dealings as far as that's concerned.
I appreciate those comments.
As for your comment earlier, I have not spoken to one at all concerning this matter.
So then how did you come about voting?
The
All 3 of
item,
you coming to the conclusion of $115,000 a year. How did you agree to that in your request? And then Mr. Stein had
if I
the
may,
same
Mr. Mayor,
request.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Please, go right ahead.
Right.
Let's have a civil conversation, no problem. Go right ahead.
The discussion was to place an item on the agenda, period. That was a discussion that we had. And
If-
that's by law, that's what we are allowed to do. We are not allowed to deliberate. We are not allowed to make any recommendations outside of agreeing to putting the agenda item on the agenda.
So by your own admission right now, you did have a discussion.
We
if I may,
agreed to
If
put
Mr.
an
Stein
item,
doesn't
put
finish, then I'll let you go ahead
an
and finish.
item on the agenda.
No, but I was referring.
And
clarify
don't try to
yourself.
turn my words, because I've said
No,
it
I'm
3
just asking you.
times. I've said it 3 times. We agreed to put an agenda item on the agenda with no specifics. Period. That's what we agreed to.
Well,
And
you
there
made
is
a
a-
huge mistake by not providing supporting documentation.
Yeah, there is a general exception for open meetings for discussing future agenda items. It's not too much of an issue, but so here's what y'all,
Not in a quorum.
the
in a
draft
walking
minutes at
quorum.
least say that the item was discuss and possible action to require that all meeting agenda items proposed by mayor, city council that may have possible action include supporting documentation. The motion then made was, I move to make a motion that city council members and mayor are required to include the information when they submit items on the agenda if they require action.
Action item.
So it's not an ordinance. I'm guessing y'all were intending to amend like rules of procedure or bylaws for yourselves.
It's the,
Um,
the code of conduct.
Yeah, just your policies for city council. And yeah, I'm not sure that it clearly requires that if you want to submit an item, it should have supporting documentation. I mean, when you submit the form for an agenda item request, if it doesn't have that, following the adoption of this rule, if it doesn't have supporting documentation, it should be turned down. That can be fixed. You shouldn't make it onto the agenda without. I don't
So-
know how that applies. It's not clear from the way that's worded, though, that council can't take action. I mean, you're a general law citizen, you can do what state law do. And there is no, it's not clear from that you can't take action just because it doesn't have, this is more about less process for putting that on the agenda than it is about what y'all can do in a meeting once it's already on the agenda. So the error was made then when this rule was not applied at the time.
I have to respectfully disagree.
And
I
that's
think
fine.
that,
And
that
in
your
the end,
assessment
this
is incorrect. Because what is the purpose and why waste our time? Why allow Mr. Sines, Mr. Lysia, put things on the agenda to waste our time at these city council meetings, waste the valuable time of the taxpayers, putting items on the agenda that they vote and they want to have someone else follow those rules. But yet, when it's convenient for them, when they're trying to achieve a specific goal that is, motivated by their actions, their organized actions, that they want those rules to be then bent and not be followed. And so what you're saying is that the rule means nothing. You're trying to tell us that the rule means nothing, and I'm sorry, as mayor, I can't allow that. Because these deliberations are made to pass rules and ordinances. The governing body has a serious implications and for what they do. If they make laws that are contrary to state laws, then they have to answer for that. In this particular case, they have made a rule that needs to be followed by the city council members, and they placed it on an open agenda, be considered, to be discussed and acted upon. Now you're telling us, which I fully disagree with you, like I've disagreed with you in the past. I don't think you have the experience enough as our city attorney. I've mentioned that to Frank Garza already. I've spoken to him.
And Mayor, I think we're
Excuse me,
going,
you're not-
I think
you're
we're
not
going
recognized,
beyond the
sir. Hold
scope.
on, please,
I understand
please.
I'm not being recognized,
Mr.
but that's
Lysias,
going
please.
beyond.
Be quiet. Quiet, please. I will recognize you in just a little bit,
Okay.
okay? Let's keep it civil, all right?
Put your hand up.
I've asked you before, do not speak unless you ask me to. And was trying to be a little bit lenient with you earlier, okay? But this is how we're gonna keep control of this meeting, right? It is my job to do that. So please, that's all I ask. I'll let you speak and say whatever you need to say. So, Counselor, that's the way I feel, and I don't think that an exception should be made. And I argue this point because what's the sense of putting these things on the agenda for? So that you can break it, so that you don't follow the rules? Why waste our time? Coming to these meetings so that you pass rules that are specific to target one individual, basically, and you then now, you want to change those rules to your benefit to achieve whatever goal you want to achieve. That to me is corruption. That to me is backroom dealing. You're trying to force something down on the citizens of the Balcones Heights. And it's so obvious that people are going to see what you're doing. This is not a normal process. How do you expect our city to move forward, to have leadership, to have people that can come into this city that doesn't have any type of connection to this political organization that you are building? And it's damaging our city.
May I be
Okay?
recognized, please?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So, in reference to one of your comments earlier about this being done to prevent you from taking over the role of city administrator, that's not really what it is. So in the last month, we passed an ordinance updating the Code Book of Ordinance, Section 31.27, to include a requirement that any individual filling the role of city administrator meet the minimum qualifications as for the city administrator. So
So your point is, I'm sorry, Councilman, I don't understand your point.
you don't meet those minimum qualifications, so you can't fill that role.
You see, you misinterpret the whole thing. You're completely, may I speak now?
No,
You finished? Go
no,
right ahead. And then
you've
I'll
also accused us
report.
of backroom dealing. I've never spoken with David Sellers about this topic at all, with the exception of calling him and asking him, would you support this agenda item being placed in a special meeting? And he said, yes. I said, thank you. And I hung up the phone. That was the extent of our conversation regarding this agenda item.
Okay,
So there was no discussions about the merits of it. There was no discussion about what the agenda item said. It was just, would you support a special meeting with this agenda item?
okay. Councilman Burton?
And I'm ready.
Also, I did want to say, when I submitted this, I specifically requested and ensured that Mr. Perales had Albert Lara's resume on file, so that it had the agenda, it had the supporting documentation.
He's not the.
And I'm
person that
ready.
You have to give it to. Go ahead,
I'm ready to
Mr.
respond
Burton.
whenever y'all are ready to get back to the question.
Well, we're
at hand.
still in discussion.
Yeah.
Well,
So.
to-
Go ahead,
To
Mr.
answer
Burton.
that though, the supporting documentation was on file
Doesn't
when I
look any
submitted,
good.
when I submitted the request.
We don't have it. We're the governing body. We're the ones that's supposed to have it, not Mr. Perales. Mr. Perales is not the hiring entity. He's on his way out. He'll be gone in 2 days. So, he's not in any way the authority that you're supposed to give this to. We are the governing body. We're the people that you need to provide the supporting documentation on your own rulings, on your own rule that you created.
The reason I asked him to ensure that we had it on file was because our agenda item requests have to go to the city administrator and then to the city secretary. So
Okay. Cut it up however you want, Mr. Stein. Mr. Burton?
So
So then I've got the three documents, one from from Mr. Sines, one from Mr. Lisea, one from Mr. Sellers. The one from Mr. Sines is the one that's more in-depth. Discussion and possible action I'm reading off my phone. Appoint Albert Lara interim city administrator effective immediately with the annual salary of $115,000 plus applicable benefits until a permanent city administrator is hired with 2-week overlap transition to the new administrator. Council members Lisea and David Sellers join me in this request in this special meeting, and he sent it at September 10th at 12:22. Mr. Lisea sent it September 10th at 5:01, and Mr. Sellers sent it at 2:40 PM, also on the 10th. And I just want to, I guess I need to go back to the main person who submitted or made the calls to everybody. Where did you pull the figure of 115 from and plus benefits?
If you don't,
Who
you
assigned
don't
you?
mind.
Who assigned you to sign that deal? Also, while Mr. Lara is serving in the capacity of a city administrator, who's filling his spot? Those are that's the supporting documentation that I need. And that's what you guys voted on. You all voted on it. Now you want to take your vote and you want to have your cake and eat it too. Can't do it. You just can't do it.
So the salary was,
You can have the floor.
thank you. Well, you asked me a specific question. So the salary was a question,
Recognized, but like I said, I'm being. a
may I
little bit-
be, may I be
I'm just
recognized?
being a little lenient, working with everyone to try to make the meeting go smoothly, so please go right ahead, Mr.
Thank you.
Sines. Yes,
So the salary was determined when I asked Mr. Perales, what would Albert Lara like to be, what would his request be for a salary? Actually, he does make the salary.
So-
He's the city administrator.
So you asked the applicant what his salary wanted to be without checking with your
I
colleague?
asked
on
Mr.
the-
Perales.
I wouldn't
You
get
asked
I never
Mr.
had
Perales,
direct-
whoever
Yeah.
you asked.
And I
Never
don't
had
think y'all
direct
need to
contact
get
with
too
Mr.
hung
Lara.
up on the salary. That can be changed. If
Yeah.
y'all want to hire him at a different salary, that's easy to
We
do by
know that.
motion. Okay.
We know that, Counselor. Thank you for letting us know that. Right
So-
now, the discussion is how this process took place.
Mr.
in a
Mr. Lara
transparent manner.
continued doing his role as Public Works, but would only have the city interim city administrator title. So he wouldn't get 2 paychecks. He would just get paid as the interim city administrator while also doing the responsibilities of the Public Works or the Director of Community Development.
But do you see the problem in that, Mr. Sines, Councilman Sines? It's fine, you feel like you did that, but you're leaving the other council members and the public out of that discussion, which should be happening here with the supporting documentation. And you had plenty of time 4 months ago when I put this item on the agenda. When I already knew that Mr. Perales was going to be leaving, I gave 4 months. I went and told you guys to start with RFP process to select a executive search firm. And you turned that down because it was too expensive. Even the most minimal cost, which is the proper way to hire somebody. And it's an investment that the city can make to assure itself it gets a qualified candidate. Now you've bypassed that process and you want to handle it a Mickey Mouse process that is going to turn out to give the city of Balcones Heights an unqualified candidate.
I am
And
in no
so-
way saying Mr. Lara is not qualified. I don't know that.
I'm referring to our.
I'm in
our
no way
permanent
saying
applicant.
this gentleman here is not qualified. I just don't know if he's qualified. I have no supporting
And neither do
documentation.
I don't know either.
And nobody else got it. And in the chain of emails that was all on the same chain, as I stated, Mr. Sines quoted 115,000. And there had to be a discussion between Mr. Lisea and Mr. Sines. It wasn't, can we put this on the agenda? Because it says by assigning Mr. Lara to the interim position, there will be salary savings. So you two did discuss salaries. There was a
If-
discussion.
If I
And it's in
may.
this, it's documented in this chain of emails.
Finish, Jack?
I-
Finish,
may-
Jack? You made a comment? Okay, yeah, just hold on, Mr. White, please, so we don't disrupt.
You can let me talk.
Councilman Hussein?
In your comment, it would only be common knowledge to say if you're going from one position to another. There's nothing to discuss. And like I've said several times, by law, we are allowed to accept or request that we agree to an agenda item. That's what was done. That's not what we're
Documentation.
discussing. You're
I have-
accusing me of
I have
doing something that I
documentation
didn't
to
do.
agree.
I'm telling
Jack,
you,
Jack,
by law, we are allowed to ask to put an item on the agenda and it calls for 3 members. The knowledge we have from within ourselves of knowing the operations of the city, knowing the impact of how one position is going to affect the other, we don't have to discuss that. We know that. So
No,
we did not have to
that-
discuss.
hold on, Mr. Burke.
That's a specific amount of money discussed by signs.
Exactly. And
Burke,
what
you
I
need-
am,
Mr.
what
Burke.
I am saying, what I am
Let
saying
him finish and then
is
you can
when
retort.
Mr. Sines asked if I would support it, I said, yes. I did not, we did not, none of us agreed to how it was going to be worded. We just agreed that, yes, I will support it. That's what the agreement was. That's what the law reads. That's what the law allows us to do.
Finish, Mr. Hussein?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Burton, you can go ahead and retort.
Well, I feel that I'm not given the opportunity to vet Mr. Lara properly. And, you know, y'all are bending the rules to make them work for you guys. And I follow the rules. And when I bring it up to you guys, now you want to bend the rules. Again, you want your cake and eat it too. Y'all are going to do what y'all want to do. You have the 3 majority votes. Get it done. Let's do it. Let's get out of
Okay,
here.
Mr. Sellers, you had some input that you wanted to bring. Go ahead.
All I wanted to say is that, as you quoted, we've had 4 months to hire somebody, and we've been procrastinating and procrastinating and procrastinating. And from day one, I have always adamantly been to promote from in-house and not hire somebody else. And when it's 2 days before he leaves, I want somebody there. $115,000 is roughly half of his salary that he worked his ass off for all the years that he's
Excuse
been
Mr.
here.
Mr.
Okay,
Sellers, please don't. curse.
so
Mr. Sellers, please don't curse in this.
Yeah,
proceeding.
whatever.
No, not whatever. sir.
no, don't
no,
reprimand me,
no,
okay?
because,
Don't.
no,
Point of order, Mayor.
it's not allowed
Don't
to do that.
reprimand me.
Okay, I'm trying to tell you,
All right.
it's not allowed to do that, sir.
Run it.
No.
Okay? You cannot be
All right.
cursing it, you cannot be cursing in a room like this, in a proceeding, okay? That's disruptive. You're not following
It's
the
a
decorum.
personal thing again.
No, it's not, sir.
Yes, it is.
It's the rule that's right here to tell you specifically. In the rule we have,
Enough.
you cannot be
Mayor,
cursing.
Mayor.
in the
Enough.
courtroom.
Mayor,
May I be recognized?
Excuse me. So if you want to finish, all I'm saying, don't curse. So finish if you like.
We're gonna see about this.
May I be recognized?
Yeah, what do you mean?
And
by
again,
that? What do
whenever
you
y'all
mean
are
by
ready to
this?
get back
Is-
to the
we're asking to
procedural
be
question at
recognized.
hand.
Let him finish, please. He still has the floor. Go ahead, Mr. Sellers.
As I was saying, he's
What- no, what do you
leaving in
mean?
You
2
know-
days. So what I'm on board with is getting a replacement in there right now. As this says, it's temporary. We need somebody in there now who's familiar with the proceedings in Balcony Heights. That's why I'm on board with this. Okay?
You know, Mr. Mayor,
That's.
Once
Mayor,
we get
may I-
somebody in
Just a
there,
minute, wait a minute.
All right,
Just-
all right.
once
Mr.
we get
Sellers,
somebody
go
in
ahead.
there, okay, he's got a couple of days to get familiarized with everything. You know what? If we make a mistake, we made a mistake. If I feel like I'm gonna wake up every morning and make a mistake, I might as well stay in bed. Okay? But this is 4 months we've been here discussing his replacement, and it hasn't happened yet.
And you have
That's
no,
why I'm on board with this.
so you have no problem with the fact that you had no supporting documentation, neither you nor Mr. Pasea or Mr.
As I
Sines
stated earlier,
did not
Mr.
provide
Mayor,
any
the documentation is that his recent employment here, the documentation was his credentials on file here.
We don't have that. I
Well,
don't have, I don't.
Why
know
didn't you
him-
get it when you got
Well,
this?
because the rule says that you're supposed to provide documentation to the
Mm,
council.
Mayor,
in order
Mayor,
to-
And
May I be
that's,
rec-
in
that's
order
a
to make-
gray
Just
area
wait a minute.
that our
Okay.
city
Wait a
attorney
minute.
has
Wait a little bit.
just quoted. The documentation is still questionable and it's a gray area.
Okay.
You are the
All right.
one who wants to force it.
No, sir, I'm not. And
Mayor-
you're
Mayor-
taking it personal
may I be-
again and you're going personal. Okay, hold on, Jack. So,
I think Mr.
Uh,
Steins was asking to be
let me
recognized.
just- Yeah, and I will. Let me just say one thing about this. Mr. Sines, you mentioned that the mayor's not qualified because you placed that addendum. that-
I'd like to call the
that rule-
question,
that
Mayor,
rule-
Mayor,
you
I'd like
haven't
to
been
call the
rec- but you
question.
have to be recognized. to
I
call the
understand
question.
that, but you
You haven't
deliberately
been called-
ignore
you
me.
haven't been
I've been
recognized.
asking to be recognized
All
for
right,
several
and I will
minutes.
recognize you when I do, okay? So just wait. I told you I would recognize you, so just wait. All right, please. So when you're discussing this about the mayor not being qualified, and you're saying that, you cannot supersede the local government code. Local government
So
code
the-
gives you that
the
authority.
agenda item tonight is just-
The agenda item.
Is just to hire, if y'all want to have a future agenda item about the qualifications of the mayor to be city administrator, we can
Well, it's
certainly do that.
germane to what we're talking about because he brought it
It-
up and this is the
It's-
discussion we're having. We're still having a discussion. So I hope
Oh.
that we can continue to have this discussion. As Mr. Burton says, you're gonna do what you're gonna do. We just
Wh-
want to put it on the record that what you're doing is wrong. And it's organized and we can see right through you like a white sheet. We know exactly what you're doing and we know exactly the reasons you're doing it. So, move ahead, do what you're gonna do. And then, Mr. Valverde, do you have anything, sir? You haven't said anything.
Yes, sir. What I was going to say is, I agree with everything that Mr. Settler said. I am a firm believer of promoting within. And I also agree with you as far as the documentations. If it's the rule that was put out, we got to have documentation. Now, Mr. Sellers is correct. His documentations are on file. It's just a matter of going there, make a copy of his documents or credentials. But we do need to have somebody in there ASAP. And that's true. We procrastinated for the last 4 or 5 months. All we've been doing is fighting against each other, arguing, and time's just getting away from us.
Yeah.
You've had
So-
the opportunity.
May I be
Yeah.
recognized, please?
Yes, please.
I'd like to call the
Go ahead.
question.
Okay. go
I'd
ahead.
like to call the
You
question.
call the question, so let's
So-
go ahead and call the vote.
So if I
So,
can,
Mr.
we've kind of got off track, but there was initially a procedural question
Yes.
and I'd like to go through that with y'all if I can.
Okay,
So
please, go right
I,
ahead.
and I'm a neutral party. I'm just here to make sure the city follows the law. And so what we've got here is there was a motion and a second to approve the item as
Right,
it was
as it was
written, right?
Mhm.
As the presiding officer, you're saying that that's an improper motion because it's in violation of the rules
Of the
adopted
rules
by the
that
city.
he- yeah,
Yes,
that you
about
have
the
to have
supporting documentation, right?
documentation. We
So
should have
you're
never, ever taken a vote on it.
on.
Because it shouldn't have ever been placed on the agenda without supporting documentation.
And that's my interpretation, which
Mhm.
again, you can take or leave my advice, but
Right.
um.
So
But
they
your
shouldn't be voted on.
ruling as the presiding officer is that it applies to prohibit city council from taking action on an item unless supporting documentation was required. And that's your interpretation,
Yes,
that's fine.
that's my interpretation of
Um,
my standing, and that's what
Then
I
you're,
feel.
as a point of order, you're saying that this is a illegal, that the motion is improper,
It's
basically. a
improper is a
violation.
better word, yes.
So the Robert's Rules of Order, that's the interpretation that's been laid out by the presiding officer.
That's correct.
If a majority disagrees and overrules that, then that, whatever they
We
say
fully
goes.
Understand that,
But in order to get to a vote, because it's been deemed
absolutely. He called the vote.
improper,
Mhm.
that would be the
He
next
called the question.
step. And you're not gonna let them call the question though?
Yes,
If
I will.
If,
I'll.
well,
other
we
words-
shouldn't if we believe that it's an improper motion. You
Okay,
can't,
so
you
then-
can't allow a vote. on it.
Okay, so
Oh,
then let you
Yeah.
continue, please.
Well, that's it. It's just that that's where we stand right now is the ruling is
It's an improper.
the motion's
motion.
improper to approve. This
Yeah.
can't be approved because it didn't follow the supporting documentation.
That's correct, and that is
And
what my
if,
ruling is.
unless the majority overrules that, then that would be where that.
Right, and
Yeah.
so I'll just put it on the record that that's my ruling.
Okay.
Maybe you recognize,
Okay.
Well, you already called the question.
right,
so-
but no, I can,
So what is the next move now,
The-
Counselor?
If, so if a,
We've already have a vote.
it
on
would
the
need to
table.
be a motion to overrule that ruling. And then if that is a seconded and a majority votes on it, then whatever that, you know,
Do we have a
So
motion
I'll-
from anybody on the city council to overrule the original motion based on the fact that there's no supporting
it's,
document?
it's a motion to
no, no, no.
overrule your
Yeah,
interpretation
overrule my
and
interpretation.
say that
Okay.
it's an
So
illegal
it's a
motion.
motion to overrule my interpretation that it's an improper
And allow the motion
procedure.
to approve to proceed. So if that motion's made and seconded and
Right.
voted on, then
I just
Okay.
want to put it on the
Okay.
record to make sure that the public knows that this is something that
You just
you
don't
can't
agree
break the
with.
rules. Okay, so do we have a motion on the floor from anyone?
yeah, I've asked to be recognized.
What's that?
I have asked to be recognized.
Okay, go right ahead.
I'll make a motion to overrule the mayor's interpretation to allow the vote to accept the original motion.
Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second from Juan Licea. Now, do we have, let's go ahead and call the roll call vote for that. Miguel Valverde? Mr. Valverde?
Hey,
Okay, Mr. Sines?
Yeah,
Mr. Licea?
Yay.
Mr. Sellers?
Yay.
Mr. Burton?
Nay.
Okay, so we got 2 nays, 2, 3, correct? So the motion
Yes.
carries.
so then the underlying motion to approve as written then that was made and seconded is then up for vote at that point.
Correct. So let's call the vote now for the original motion that was made to approve the business item number 1 as stated. Do we have a motion for Mr. Valverde? What is your-
Motion or a vote?
Excuse me, we're going to call a vote for now that we already have a first and a second. So now let's roll call vote
to vote,
to approve number 1.
to approve Mr. Lara.
Now
as
going
the
back to
interim
the
city
original
administrator.
vote on approving Mr. Lada as the city administrator
without the documentation.
without the documentation.
Yeah,
Okay? So Mr. Sines.
Yeah,
Mr. Licea.
Yay.
Mr. Sellers.
Yay.
Councilman Burton.
Nay.
Okay, so we have 4-1, motion carries. Okay, business is then finished on that item. Let's call for an adjournment. Anybody have a
Move to
motion
adjourn.
Call for an adjournment?
move to adjourn.
Okay. So what did you mean, David, about we'll deal with this later? What do you mean by that? Is that a threat? Is that a threat? All right. That's good. I'll take something.
Mayor,
Need to think-
Mayor Rodriguez. Mayor,
That's okay. I'll turn it off now.
Mayor,
Yes.
we need the time for the meeting,
Okay,
please.
the time is exactly now 6:52 because it's 6:53. Let's make it 6:52 PM, for the adjournment of the meeting.